My high school art teacher hated me. That is no word of a lie. She had it out for me from day one. When I first started in high school, I was terrified of absolutely everyone. I never spoke up, I never did anything bad. I was just a good child, but apparently that was not enough for my art teacher. For the purpose of this whole story, we are going to call her Mrs. Robinson because it's the first name that I came up with, and honestly, I feel like it suits her. The very first day that I had art, she gave me bad vibes. I walked into class, I sat down, and I felt a disturbance in the force. I did not have the high ground that day, and it was not great. Instantly, she was one of those teachers who had us sitting in a seating plan. I'm gonna get controversial for a second. I didn't mind the seating plan. I had a really bad anxiety, I was an anxious kid, and to be honest, the seating plan took a lot of pressure off me. So as much as everyone else kind of cursed her out a little bit, I honestly didn't mind her for that. Obviously, she was trying to make a good impression, so she let us have the entire first class to take out our art books and make a title page. In this title page, she gave us a few things to include, our name, her name, basic things. But she also required us to show our personality, things that we liked. And unfortunately for her, I was kind of a weeb. Big anime goer. What can I say? I was just ahead of my time. I was into anime before it was cool. So obviously I drew my entire title page in an anime art style. Was it good? No. Did it meet the parameters? I think so. I mean, I had names, I had dates, and honestly, that's all you could really ask for. I was a young child. I was a scared 13-year-old. What else would you expect from me? At the end of that class, Mrs. Robinson went around and looked at everyone's title pages. Again, I had really bad anxiety, so I was stressing so badly. Being judged by adults, honestly being judged by anyone, really was not something I enjoyed. But something that made me a little bit more at ease was that she was praising everyone who came before me. She was loading up the compliments, so I felt my stress melt away. And that was my first mistake. She came to me, looked at my title page, looked at me, and looked back at my title page and said, "You need to redo this." This came as the biggest shock to me. Was it good? Again, no. It looked like a collage of random things. The art was not very good or aesthetically pleasing, but this was my first art class. There was no direction. I had not learned anything. What did she expect? Some kind of Picasso piece? Because I cannot even do that now. Looking back on other people's stories, I feel like maybe it was just the anime that she had a problem with, but that wasn't really the issue. See, a few months later, some of my friends ended up taking that class, and they showed me their title pages, and they said how the teacher loved them. And their title pages were also in an anime art style. When I came to my title page, she just said that I didn't meet the prompts and then I had to redo it. Gave me no other instruction, and she went on her way praising every other student after me. My tiny little baby ego became 3 times smaller that day. I continued taking the class, and honestly, it was just basic art stuff. She never really looked at our work all that often, or at least she never really looked at mine. I noticed that when we would have some substitute teachers come in, they would often use my work as an example, and they really praised me a lot, and that made me feel really good. And then it also made me try a lot harder when Mrs. Robinson was in, because I wanted her to praise me, and that never happened. Flash forward a bit, I didn't take art for 2 years, but in grade 10, I took art again. I ended up taking art because I actually had a huge interest in it at this point. I really wanted to make my own comics and just get better at drawing in general, but also I had a bunch of friends who wanted to take art as well, and again, I had a real bad anxiety, so I wanted to stick close with my friends. Now, of course, I did end up drawing anime in this class, so did a lot of other people, but when it came to our final works, I stayed clear from anime. Mind you, at this point, I was thinking maybe she just didn't like me then, or it was all in my head. Spoiler alert, it was not all in my head. Later that year, we ended up doing stuff with clay. I was actually never really interested in working with physical mediums, but it was pretty cool. It would be a fun experience. We had to get into groups and decide what we wanted to make out of the clay, whether it was jewelry, pots, whatever. I ended up getting into a group with 2 of my friends, and we decided that we wanted to do jewelry, so that entire class we spent the time just getting inspiration pictures. Also during that day, 2 of our other friends actually weren't there, so we went up to Mrs. Robinson and we said, "Hey, these 2 people are here. They obviously cannot do this work. They can join our group so that they don't have to stress." She said that was fine. She said it was fine. She liked the idea. Keep that in mind. So we gathered our inspiration pictures, and all we had to do over the next few days was go up to people and ask them which pictures they liked more and why. Pretty simple. Unfortunately though, I was sick for the next few days. I was sick a lot during school. My attendance was atrocious. But in my defense, I have thalassemia, something that the school was aware of, so they were meant to make accommodations for me when I'm sick. Basically, it just means that when I get sick, I get real sick and it takes me a lot longer to get over it, and my immune system is kind of compromised a little bit. But I was a good student, so it didn't really matter. Anyway, I ended up coming back to school after being sick, and I told my group, I was like, hey, I'm so sorry, I was sick. I couldn't really ask people about the art project, but I asked my family. So, I'm really sorry. And my friends were like, yeah, no, that's fine, but you aren't in our group anymore. And I had to do a mental double take. Why am I not in your group? Was I kicked out? Did you guys kick me out or something? What's happening? And my friend said, oh no, we didn't kick you out. Mrs. Robinson said we had too many people in our group, so she got you and the 2 people who were absent that day to be in a group together. Now, I checked my email and stuff religiously whenever I was away, so I knew that she hadn't contacted me at all about this, and I was kind of confused. I ended up going up to the 2 people who were away that day and said, hey, you are aware that we're in an art group together? And they said, no, I had no idea. Apparently, they'd also been away up until this point, so none of us had any idea what the hell we were doing. Flash forward to art, and Mrs. Robinson came around in the morning to assess everyone's homework. She went through, looked at all of their examples and all of the people that they asked, and if they met their requirements, she let them go and start work on their amazing projects. She came to my group, looked at us, and then looked at me specifically and said, where is your homework? I looked at her and said, oh, well, we were in a group with our 2 other friends, but we were away since then, and you moved us to a different group. She looks at me, she nods, she said, yes, I did. And I said, well, you didn't get in contact with me to tell me that you moved us, so I did work for my original group and not my new group. And she said, that's unacceptable. I'm sorry, what? How is this unacceptable? This isn't my fault. I did my best. I was sick. It is not my fault that you moved me. She gave us half of class to work as a group, to get examples, and basically just do what we were meant to have done at this point. So everything was fine and dandy, except me and the 2 other people in my group could not agree on what to do. They caved, and we ended up doing jewelry because we could find more examples for it. And obviously this entire time, Mrs. Robinson was death staring us. I felt it more on me, but also I feel like she was death staring the whole group. Now, that's kind of the biggest issue that happened that year, because that entire project was half of our grade, and she had already marked me pretty negatively based off of that, so screw you, Mrs. Robinson, you sucked. So then we go to the next year, grade 11. At this point, I did not enjoy art, but I picked it for grade 10, so I was like, yeah, I'll go through with it, because genuinely was very much interested in art. Again, I have thalassemia, something that the school is very well aware of. It means that I get sick for longer and I get sick easier. That is also not my fault, but she was making it my fault. So time went on and we had one art piece that was due pretty soon. I ended up drawing this beautiful flower that honestly looked pretty realistic. I'm someone who hates realism, but honestly, that flower was pretty good. And Mrs. Robinson must have thought so too. She genuinely got upset with me for having a realistically drawn flower as part of my project. She was so adamantly convinced that I had just taken a flower and photoshopped it onto my canvas. She would try to sneak behind me and catch me doing something untoward. So we had to choose a few artists to analyze, and unfortunately being Insta-famous was not recognized by Mrs. Robinson, so I had to find some actual gallery artists, and I found some pretty cool ones. She didn't like my original artists, so she picked new ones for me. The artists that I picked previously, their work was very much multimedia, it was very fun, very colorful. The artists that she gave to me essentially were just painters who painted in grayscale. She made me have these artists. I was not happy. That being said, I looked on the positive. I figured I could add some color and interest into the works. So when Mrs. Robinson came and said, hey, let's talk about mixed media pieces, I was like, hell yeah. She went around the class and asked people to give her some ideas for some mixed media pieces that they could do that fell in with their artists. People gave some pretty good suggestions, but all in all, they weren't really hitting the prompt, which they kind of knew as they were saying it. And then it came to me. Her obvious favorite student. I ended up throwing out an idea that I thought was pretty good. Like a black and white photo of a girl holding a heart. This heart would then be cut out, and under it would be a watercolor picture of a storm. And everyone in that class said, yeah, that hits the prompt. Mrs. Robinson, however, but it would be better if you made a wax sculpture and filmed it slowly melting. How is that better than my idea? She took my idea, threw it in the trash, burnt it, and somehow came out with wax. Now you may be thinking, Keto, what happened in the next year? What else did Mrs. Robinson do to you? The answer is nothing. I made it 4 days into grade 12, said nope, and dropped out. Yes, I am a high school dropout. Yes, I am my family's disappointment. Thank you so much for noticing. However, I did kind of get my revenge on Mrs. Robinson. Basically at school we had these dedicated emails which teachers would use to send us work that we'd missed, any information, where we would also use to send our work to our teachers. And after you leave school, it takes them a while to delete your email. So I still had access to it. And I kind of emailed Mrs. Robinson, telling her that I didn't like how she treated me and challenging her to a boxing match. A little while later, my email account was deleted, so I have no idea if she saw that email or if she accepted.